Chapter 7 Freedom. Myron crumbled a cracker on the windowsill next to his desk, then looked away. He knew Audley came only when nobody was looking. A little while later, a bird landed on the windowsill and ate the crumbs. Myron watched him out of the corner of his eye. He was a blackbird with a pink chest. Myron had named him Audley. Myron had named him Audley. "Is that your dumb bird again?" asked Kathy. "No," said Myron. "Audley is not my bird. I don't own him. He doesn't live in a cage. Audley is free." "You're a bird brain," said Kathy. Myron watched Audley fly away. It made him sad and glad at the same time. He wished he could fly away across the sky with Audley. "Audley probably thinks I live in a cage," he realized. "Whenever he sees me, I'm sitting in this same desk. He probably thinks his desk is my cage." So Myron got out of his chair and sat on the floor. "Myron, what are you doing out of your seat?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I want to sit on the floor," said Myron. Several kids laughed. "Get back in your seat," ordered Mrs. Jules. Myron reluctantly returned to his desk. "I do live in a cage," he thought. "I'm not allowed out. I have to stay in my cage until the bell rings. Then I have to go down the stairs. Then, when it rings again, I have to go up the stairs. Then when it rings again, I have to go down the stairs. Then when it rings again, I have to go up the stairs. I'm never free." The bell rang. Myron went down the stairs. It was so crowded with kids rushing to recess that he couldn't stop if he wanted. It was as if someone had lifted his cage and was carrying him down the stairs. The bell rang again. Myron went up the stairs. At lunch, the bell rang again. Myron went down the stairs. After lunch, the bell rang again. Myron stood at the bottom of the staircase and looked up. "No," he declared, "I won't go. I have to be free." As all the other kids rushed past him, he eased his way around to the back of the stairs. As everybody else went up, Myron went down to the basement. He nervously walked down the old creaky staircase. He didn't know what he'd find or what would find him. He had heard that dead rats were living down there, or worse, maybe even Mrs. Gorf. Mrs. Gorf was the meanest teacher Myron had ever had. She used to be the teacher on the 30th story, before Mrs. Jules took over. But nobody believed that Mrs. Gorf was really gone. Everyone said that she was still lurking somewhere inside Wayside School. He stepped off the last step at the very bottom of Wayside School. It was too dark to see. Somewhere he heard a drip that echoed all around the cold and damp room. With his arms outstretched, he stepped across the gritty floor. His hand struck against a large, fat pipe above his head. The pipe felt like it was covered with 1,000 spider webs. Still, Myron kept his finger on the pipe as he walked, so he wouldn't get lost. As long as he stayed with the pipe, he knew he'd be able to find his way back to the stairs. Something crawled across his hand. He shook it off, then continued walking. He thought he heard footsteps behind him. He stopped walking. The sound of the footsteps continued for a second, then stopped. He started again, then stopped. The footsteps stopped a few seconds later. He wasn't alone. It was too dark for Myron to see who was following him, but he realized that meant that the person couldn't see him either. Whoever was coming after him had to have been following along the pipe too. So Myron left the safety of the pipe and headed blindly across the basement. The footsteps continued behind him. He stopped. The footsteps stopped too. He bent down, then untied and took off his right sneaker. He threw it toward the other side of the basement. He heard it hit the floor. Then the footsteps started after it. Very quietly, he took off his other sneaker and threw it in the same direction. He never heard his shoe hit the ground. The footsteps started again after him. He started to run, but slipped in his soft feet on a spot of slime. His hands hit loud and hard as he fell on the cold floor. The footsteps came hurriedly toward him. He held his breath and tried to be as quiet as possible. A light turned on above his head. He screamed. "I believe this is yours," said a bald man. He was holding Myron's left sneaker. Next to him were two men with black mustaches. One of the men held a black attaché case. Myron shook his head. "That's not my shoe," he said. "I never saw it before." The bald man glanced at Myron's shoeless feet. "What's your name?" asked the man with the attaché case. "Myron," said Myron. He regretted it as soon as he had said it. He wished he had made up a fake name. The man opened his attaché case and took out a notebook. "Myron," he repeated as he thumbed through the notebook. "You were supposed to be in Mrs. Jewell's class at the desk next to the window, in front of Sherry. What are you doing out of your cage? I mean, seat?" Asked the other man with the mustache. "I just wanted to be free," chirped Myron. "Please don't hurt me. If you let me go back to Mrs. Jewell's room, I'll never come down here again." "Well, do you want to be free, or do you want to be safe?" asked the bald man. "Huh?" asked Myron. "You can't have it both ways," said the bald man. "Do you want to be safe?" asked one of the men with the mustache. "Do you want to sit in the same chair every day and go up and down the stairs every time the bell rings?" "You'll have to go to school 5 days a week," said the other man with the mustache. "And you'll have to go to bed at the same time every day." "But first you'll have to brush your teeth," said the other man with the mustache. "And you won't be allowed to watch TV until you finish your homework," said the other man with the mustache. "You'll have to go inside when it rains. But first you'll have to wipe your feet." "Or you can be free," said the bald man. The man took a pencil and a piece of paper out of his attaché case. "So, do you want to be safe, or do you want to be free?" Myron looked at the three men. "I want to be free," he said bravely. The man with the attaché case wrote something on a piece of paper and gave it to Myron. "Sign here," he said. Myron couldn't read the piece of paper. It was written on some kind of foreign language. He signed his name. The man took the paper and pencil from Myron and put them back into his attaché case. "Okay, you're free," he said. "Good luck, Myron," said the bald man. "Here, I think you'll need this." He gave Myron his left sneaker, then reached up and pulled the chain. The light turned off. Myron found himself alone in the darkness. He put his shoe back on, then hopped across the basement floor. He had no idea how to get back. At last his hand hit against the pipe, but he still didn't know which way to follow it, left or right. He didn't even know if it was the right pipe. He turned left and continued hopping, keeping his finger on the pipe. He was just about ready to turn around and try the other way when he nearly fell over the bottom stair. He hopped up the stairs and continued hopping all the way up to Mrs. Jewell's room. He was tired, sore, and dirty. "You're late, Myron," said Mrs. Jewells. "Go write your name under the word discipline. Then return to your seat for the arithmetic test." But Myron didn't feel like taking an arithmetic test, and he definitely didn't want to write his name on the board. So he sat on the floor, and there was nothing Mrs. Jewells could do about it. He was free. After school, Mrs. Jewells found Myron's other sneaker in the teacher's lounge, in the refrigerator. Chapter 8, The Best Part. Todd brought a toy to school. It was a cute, adorable puppy dog. Everyone who saw it said, "Aww." "Aw," said Jenny, "he has such a sweet face." "Aw," said Stephen, "look at her darling eyes." "Aw," said Dee Dee, "isn't he just the cutest puppy you've ever seen?" "Aw, isn't he adorable?" said Calvin. Joy sat at the desk behind Todd. Big deal, she thought. It's just a hunk of plastic that happens to look like a dog. But even though Joy didn't like Todd's toy, she decided to steal it. "Wait," said Todd. "Let me show you the best part." Before he could show them the best part, Mrs. Jules rang her cowbell. "Take your seats," she commanded. "The bell has rung." All the children returned to their desks. "Todd, go write your name on the blackboard." Todd was the only one who had been in his seat, yet he was the one who got in trouble. That was typical. Mrs. Jules had a system. The first time someone got in trouble, he had to write his name on the blackboard, under the word discipline. The second time he got in trouble, he had to put a check next to his name. And if he got in trouble a third time, he had to circle his name and then go home early at 12 o'clock on the kindergarten bus. Todd went home on the kindergarten bus every day. Some of the other kids thought he was lucky, but he wished just once he could make it to 12 o'clock without getting into trouble 3 times. He walked to the front of the room and wrote his name on the blackboard under the word discipline. While Todd was at the board, Joy reached over her desk, and onto Todd's. She felt around for the toy. But as she tried to lift it out, it caught on something and dropped to the floor. Todd returned to his seat. "Todd, is that your toy on the floor?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Hey, how'd it get there?" "You know the rules, Todd," said Mrs. Jules. "Toys must be kept inside your desk, or else I take them." "Oh no, I lost my place. There it is. Now bring it here." Todd gave his toy to Mrs. Jules. "Oh, how precious," cooed Mrs. Jules. "He's the most lovable puppy I've ever seen." She kissed Todd's plastic puppy on its plastic nose. "I guess I can let you off this time," she said. "But try to keep him in your desk." She kissed Todd's toy again and handed it back to him. "You can erase your name from the board, too." Todd could hardly believe it. For the first time ever, he erased his name from the board. As he headed back to his seat, Mrs. Jules said, "Here, take a Tootsie Roll Pop, too, for the sweet puppy." Todd was amazed. So was Joy. Now, more than ever, she wanted that toy. Out at recess, everyone wanted to see Todd's toy. "It's magic," said Bibi. "It kept you from getting in trouble." "No, Mrs. Jules is just a nice teacher," said Todd. "Here, let me show you the best part." He grabbed hold of the dog's tail and turned it like a crank. Suddenly, the cute floppy ears stood straight up. The mouth opened wide, and the teeth grew into sharp fangs. "Wow," breathed Dee Dee. Todd wasn't finished. He pulled the dog's nose and stretched out its face. The cheeks became thin and bony. The eyes were no longer sweet, but grim and frightening. "What a great toy," said Calvin. The cute little puppy had turned into a mean, hungry, man-eating wolf. "I still haven't shown you the best part," said Todd. But before he could show them the best part, the bell rang, and everyone ran up the stairs to class. "I've got to get that puppy dog," thought Joy, as she stared at the back of Todd's neck. "Then I'll never get in trouble again." She didn't know Todd's toy had changed into a man-eating wolf. Her lunchbox was on her lap. She quietly opened it and took out a carton of cranberry juice and a tiny straw. She stuck the straw into the carton and sucked up some juice into it. She waited for Mrs. Jules to turn around, then blew the juice out of the straw. It splattered against Todd's neck. He slapped the back of his neck with his hand, and Joy laughed to herself. She sucked up some more juice, took careful aim, and fired. Todd turned around, but Joy already had the straw out of her mouth and was looking down at her book. Todd rubbed his neck and faced front. Joy sucked up more juice and blew it onto Todd's neck. "Hey," he shouted, turning around. "Leave me alone, Todd. I'm trying to work," said Joy. "Todd, what's the matter with you?" asked Mrs. Jules. "I try to be nice, but you just take advantage. Now go write your name on the blackboard." Todd walked to the front of the room. He still thought Mrs. Jules was the nicest teacher in the world. He looked up at the clock. It was almost 11. "I might just make it today," he thought. "I might just make it." He started to write his name when he heard a loud scream. He turned around and saw Joy jumping up and down, waving her hand in the air. His toy was biting her pinky, and she couldn't shake it off. "Help!" screamed Joy as she hopped around the room. "Todd, how do I get it off? Todd, please?" Todd smiled. "There," he said. "That's the best part." Chapter 9. Mush. Warning: do not read this story right after eating. In fact, don't read it right before eating either. In fact, just to be safe, don't read this story if you're ever planning to eat ever again. Miss Mush wiped her hands on her apron. She smiled at the children who were lined up at the cafeteria. It warmed her heart to see how much they liked her food. Mauricia was first in line. "And what would you like today, Mauricia?" Miss Mush asked. She knew the name of every child in Wayside School. Mauricia looked at the sign. "Special today, mushroom surprise." "Just milk," said Mauricia. "I brought my lunch." Miss Mush smiled and gave Mauricia a carton of milk. Joy was next in line. "And what would you like, Joy?" asked Miss Mush. "Milk," said Joy. Miss Mush smiled and gave Joy a carton of milk. "And what would you like, Jason?" "Milk, please," said Jason. "Just milk," said Damien. "Milk," said DJ. "Milk," said Leslie. It was almost Ron's turn. He hadn't brought a lunch. He normally brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to school, but there hadn't been a single slice of bread in his house this morning. "I know," his mother said. "I'll give you some money and you can buy a nice hot lunch from Miss Mush." She thought it was a brilliant idea. "Can't I just have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the bread?" Ron asked. Now he looked up at the sign. "Special today, mushroom surprise." He wished he weren't so hungry. This was the 18th day in a row that the special was mushroom surprise. It was called mushroom surprise because it would have been a surprise if anybody ever ordered it. No one ever did, except Louis, of course. That's why they'd had it for 18 days. There was always plenty left over. "Milk," said Terence. "Milk," said Sherry. "Milk," said Calvin. "Milk, please," said Bibi. "And what would you like today, Ron?" asked Miss Mush. Ron took a breath. "Mushroom surprise?" he squeaked. Tears of joy filled Miss Mush's eyes. She blew her nose on her apron and then said, "One mushroom surprise coming right up." Tears came to Ron's eyes too, but for a different reason. He looked at the mushroom surprise. It was sort of green. So was Ron. Miss Mush proudly dumped a hot lump of mushroom surprise on a paper plate and handed it to Ron. He put it on his tray, then pushed it over to the cash register where he paid for it. The news quickly spread around the cafeteria, then up and down the stairs and out to the playground. "Ron ordered the mushroom surprise! Ron ordered the mushroom surprise!" Mrs. Jules was sitting in the teacher's lounge on the 12th floor when Bibi burst into the room. All the teachers were shocked to see her. "Bibi, you're not allowed in here," said Mrs. Jules. "This is a secret place." "Ron ordered the mushroom surprise," Bibi shouted. Then she ran back up to the cafeteria. As Ron sat down at a table, 87 kids crowded around him to watch him eat. "I wonder what the surprise is," said Dee Dee. She had the best view. She was pushed right up alongside Ron's chair. "Maybe it tastes good," said Leslie. "Maybe that's the surprise." "No, I think it's called mushroom surprise because after you eat it, it's a surprise if you don't die," said Mac. "Louis eats it. He's not dead," said Jason. "Louis has been eating Miss Mush's food for a long time. He's immune to it," said Allison. Ron dug his plastic fork into the goop. He raised it to his mouth. Dana covered her eyes. "I can't watch," she exclaimed. Ron opened his mouth wide. The fork entered. He brought the fork out again. It was empty. Ron chewed twice, then swallowed. He ate it, Dee Dee announced for those who couldn't see. Stephen screamed. Said Ron. Not too bad. It sort of tastes like a mixture of bananas and spinach. What's the surprise? Asked Dee Dee. Ron looked at Dee Dee. His face flushed and his eyes changed color. His whole body began to shake, like a washing machine on the spin cycle. Dee Dee was afraid he was going to throw up. She tried to get away, but with everyone crowded around, there was no room for her to move. But Ron didn't throw up. He stood up, put his arms around Dee Dee's neck, and kissed her smack on the cheek. He sat back down. His eyes returned to their normal color. Ugh, said Dee Dee, wiping her cheek on her sleeve. What's the matter? Asked Ron. Don't you know what you just did? Asked Allison. He shrugged. I ate some mushroom surprise. It wasn't bad. Sort of like a mixture of hot dog and grape jelly. I wonder what the surprise is. He dug his plastic fork back into the goop. Everybody ran away. When Mrs. Jules entered the cafeteria, no one was there except for Ron. He was sitting alone at a table eating mushroom surprise. Mrs. Jules sat down next to him. Hi, Ron, she said. So how does it taste? And what's the surprise? Ron swallowed another mouthful. He looked at his teacher. His face flushed and his eyes changed color. And that is where we will stop for today. What do you think happened? I don't know. I will see you all back tomorrow for the next few chapters of Louis Sachar's Wayside School is Falling Down. See you later.